Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Med School Minutes podcast, where we discuss what it takes to attend and successfully complete a medical program. This show is brought to you by St. James School of Medicine. Here is your host, Kaushik Gua.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us on another episode of Med School Minutes, where we talk about everything MD related with a focus on international students, specifically students from the Caribbean. Today, we have Dr. Youssef Majed, who is the Chief Academic Officer of the South Texas Health System, as well as the ACGME Designated Institutional Officer for South Texas as well. We are going to be talking a little bit about the perception of Caribbean medical students and how it's changed since he started his career nearly 2 decades ago to today, where we are talking about appointing a Caribbean medical graduate as the Surgeon General of the United States of America. So this is truly an issue of pride for all Caribbean students and all IMGs across the board. Without further ado, let's welcome Dr. Youssef Majed. Hello, Dr. Majed. Thank you so much for coming back to our podcast once again. It is always a pleasure. But for viewers who aren't familiar with you, can you let us know, can you tell us a little bit about your background?
Sure. My name is Youssef Majed. I'm an MD, graduated in 2007. All my life dedicated to medical education since then, and even a little bit before I have graduated. I started with Kaplan, downtown Chicago. I grew myself up to establish more review programs for the USMLEs, trying to fill the gaps and make it as easy as possible for medical students to have a comprehensive one-stop and focusing on the main important points to finish their USMLEs and move on with their lives. From there, I grew up to have my own program, USMLE Review, and then we used to have about 300 students to 400 students a year. We grew up very rapidly. And from there on, I got involved more in the hospital setting, working on discharge committees, and I worked in the patient care, trying to see again how we can bring this gap and bridge it and have a vertical integration from starting medical schools all the way to residency. And then in between, trying to see, okay, where are the deficits and try to fix them up. Recently, I have hired as a DIO and Chief Academic Officer for South Texas Health System. I've been in this position for at least 3 years now. Within the 3 years, we have established 3 residency programs under my leadership, and that's family medicine complement of 30, and internal medicine complement of 60, emergency medicine complement of 30. Currently working on surgery for 2026. And then we're working on neurology for 2026, and we're working on psychiatry for 2026, as well as at least three fellowships for 2025, starting in 2026 as well.
Wow, that's excellent. So at St. James, we have a nickname for you. We call you Dr. Mountain Mover Majed, and I think that's very, very appropriate. That's phenomenal. Going back to your experience when you started out, which year did you start out in Kaplan?
About 2006.
2006. Wow. So you've been in the industry for nearly 18 years now.
Correct.
And that's not nearly, more than 18 years, actually. So, you're an IMG as well. Is that right?
Correct.
So one thing I do want to talk about a little bit is the impression that people have about IMG, specifically Caribbean medical students. When you started, what was the scenario or landscape like for IMG specifically for Caribbean students?
So there are 2 things. For my undergrad, I went to Wayne State University. And then the question says like, okay, how did you even hear about the Caribbean medical schools? At that time, they were new to us. You're talking about 2002.
Right.
2002 Caribbean market, it wasn't very popular, and at the same time, this is when the DO schools were starting also to open their classes. So there was the
Hmm.
Caribbean schools and DO schools, but with all due respect, we were not very knowledgeable about a DO as well as the Caribbean. So to us, it was kind of like equal. I don't know much about DO schools. I don't know much about Caribbean schools. And then it was a word of mouth. Somebody would come and then they're getting residency here, says, I went to this school. And then somehow we follow their lead without knowing the ins and outs. And really, what does it take for you to go to a Caribbean school, at least back then? With over time, Caribbean schools has grown in numbers, and DO schools has grown in numbers. The DO schools have built a reputation. Obviously, being in the U.S., they have the support, the resources, etc., and which is was regulated also by the LCMEs, accreditation bodies, whether it's allopathic or osteopathic school. So the standards are there. Unfortunately, with the Caribbean schools, it was kind of like an open market. Somebody comes in, they had no knowledge, no idea. They look at it at that time from a business point of view. But students did not know that this market is built on a business. So they, over time, it created a lot of stigma. Instead
Right.
of keep it regulated and make it really meet the benchmark that the U.S., especially most of the market there is U.S. students, it was kind of like open loose. You will go in there, you take a building, you open a medical school, no accreditation, or it shuts down, etc. And then students end up being loose. So a stigma has built around that. That if you are a Caribbean students, you go there, uh, you can sit on the beach, get a degree, come back here. And this is of course not true, but it was harshly judged based on the
Okay.
many schools that has been opened, and they did not meet the standard of the US, especially if you're sending students back to the US.
Right. So, I mean, let's talk about that perception a little bit about sitting on the beach, sipping Mai Tais, and then going through medicine. So, that's most certainly not true because every US graduate and every Caribbean graduate has to take the exact same exam. Is that right? Okay. And this is more so not true now because people who started in the early 2000s are in pretty prominent positions of leadership in medical education, like yourself. So, for example, now, do you think, considering you started in 2006 versus anybody who's graduating from a Caribbean medical school, and I must say, accredited medical school, right? I mean, or do you think any Caribbean school has the same perception across the board?
No. So being accredited, yes. But finish your question first, and then
Right. So the question I'm trying to say is somebody who graduated in 2006 first from say St. James. St. James was around in 2006 versus in 2024, 2025, 2000 and 2025. Do you think that they have an easier time now or a harder time now, or it still remains the same? What's your opinion?
that's good. So I myself, I oversee the programs. I see how the program directors, what they're looking for, etc., and ranking overall, what we look for, etc. So I can be fully honest with you. Today, it's easier because a lot of the schools who could not maintain accreditation in the Caribbean has shut down. And not only that, Caribbean students have proved themselves coming back home. And over the time since 2006 till now, a lot of them are, quite few are practicing physicians. What offset that formula is if you look at the osteopathic, allopathic admission and graduation and getting a job within first year versus Caribbean schools as a whole. And that's the problem. They're judged all in a group, one group. So people here don't
Okay.
know that this is St. James, this is Rocks, this is this, this is that. These are accredited schools, which we call them tier one, right?
Okay.
But then they look at them as Caribbean medical school. The same thing, we are judged. We look at the schools in the United States, American medical
Hmm.
schools. So it's the same concept. We both judge each other. We stereotype saying this is an American, but we do say
Right.
this is Caribbean without differentiating. We don't go into school by school. So
Right.
that students have contributed to decreasing that stigma to a certain extent by working so hard, by
Hmm.
achieving their goals and moving up in the chain to take positions back home in the United States and be able to prove, yes, I went a couple of years to the Caribbean school, but that stigma that you're thinking of me, I have a less quality of education, it is not true. Uh,
Right.
but if you look at it as a whole, the stigma is still there. Why? Because again, the admission criteria versus how many students graduates versus how many gets matched in the first year for the whole entire offshore, not only specifically for one school.
Right. Right. So, and again, I mean, I do want to point out that people like yourself, having being an IMG, all of you are in positions of power. I deal with a lot of program directors. A lot of these program directors, and I would go out on a limb and say, actually, the majority of the ones that I deal with, at least, are actually IMGs themselves. And they've mentioned, and you yourself, Dr. Majed, have taken, and not just now, but since you've been dealing with students for so many decades, have dealt with American students, have dealt with Caribbean students. What is your impression of Caribbean students who are coming out from, say, accredited programs and going through the step 1, step 2, and going to residency? What is your experience? Are they better? Are they worse? Are they the same? Are they at par? What's your thoughts on that?
So there's a pros and cons, and the issues that we face today are different than 2006 and
Okay.
2010. In 2006, 2010, we all worked so hard, and we learned how to say the yes sir, very respectful for our physicians. We will come in earlier, leaving after the physician, or the physician will have to kick us out, says just go home, go rest, etc. But at the same time, we were working so hard, but we did not have the resources we have today, because these
Okay.
Caribbean medical schools were also new in the market there. They were learning the curve as well, how to meet the accreditation body and what is it that the student need in order to excel on the steps. While today we do have these resources, everything is online. We have comprehensive libraries, all these programs, etc. The generation has changed. We have entitlement, uh,
Okay.
and there is misconception. I go in, I don't care. I'll just pass my exam and I'll go in, and
Right.
that's not true. So the personalities has changed since then, even though resources has changed. It was less
Okay.
resources back then. We had to work harder. Now we have
Yeah.
more resources
Hustle.
and support.
Right.
But back then, I believe the way we presented ourselves is it was much better, more respectful, less entitlement. And again, we worked very hard. Today is
Right.
you talk to somebody, says, can I go to lunch, while your physician is still, their head is in the foot of the patient trying to figure out. Physician looks and says, yeah, sure, go ahead. And then you come back, says, oh, it's 4 o'clock, can I go home, I need to study. You see, there is that, and I'm not saying only Caribbean schools, but maybe because I deal a lot with offshore medical schools, I see that.
Uh-huh. Okay. So as far as that perception is concerned, and and again, we have a lot of students in South Texas, and as well as other places, and you've been dealing with not just St. James but several Caribbean medical schools. I know you deal mostly with, not mostly, almost exclusively with only accredited schools. When it comes to comparison with American students, do you think that what you just described is really just a generational thing, as opposed to, I went to the Caribbean, I was on the beach and I drank a lot of Mai Tais for passing my exams. What are your thoughts on that?
So that stigma has came down, but it's not
Okay.
completely. So again, it
Okay.
also depends on the program director, how new they are, how long they've been running the show, where they graduated from as well. So in our programs, we do have IMG program directors and we have AMG's program directors.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm gonna be honest with you, the stigma is there, but it's way much less. So now your
Okay.
scores, your attitude, it makes a big difference. So
Right.
here's
Okay.
what we look for. We give priority to AMGs, and we won't
Right.
hide this but we don't want to stigmatize also our program. We're very careful. For
Right.
example, when we say AMGs is osteopathic, allopathic, they take a priority. We would like to have a bigger portion or the majority of portion from there. We would like to have our second is that formula is for offshore medical students versus totally foreign medical grad. Why offshore medical students from accredited school? Because they come and they rotate 2 years in the States. They have done their undergrad here for the most part. They do understand the culture. And we have noticed, not necessarily here, but I was in different states where totally foreign medical grad with no US experience, not knowing the culture, you feel like a fourth year medical student, sometimes they can operate better than them. And I want to say sometimes most of the part. Why? Because their focus overseas in different country is totally different on how to approach the patient care and the quality and creating a space and respect. All this is here is given. I don't have to teach you that.
Right.
So,
I got you.
so our second in line is the offshore medical school, and third in line will be totally foreign medical grad. Now, when we
Okay.
look at the offshore, which is the Caribbean schools, we look as did they do their undergrad here? That helps. I mean, it's not the end of the world, but what's important to us, have they rotated in the United States? That makes a big
Okay.
difference to us.
Okay.
Because we notice these 2 years of rotations, it does make a huge difference versus someone
Oh, wow.
did not rotate at all in the United States.
Okay.
But we look for also scores, attempts,
Right.
lot of recommendations, and their connection to the area, which is also something very important to us. Are
Okay.
they, for us, Texas? Are we in Texas? Are you in Texas? So, yes. Okay, good. How close are you to us?
Right.
Have you rotated with us before? Do we know you? And that's a
Okay.
big assurance.
Okay. So I do want to point out that our president, Donald Trump, he's nominated Dr. Nesheiwat as Surgeon General of the United States. I think this is a big deal because she is a foreign medical graduate. She is an IMG. She is from a Caribbean school. Do you think that this sort of an appointment would potentially change perceptions if they haven't already?
Eventually, if you know how to use it, the same thing. I'm telling you, like when first Caribbean school started, nobody knew anything about them, good or bad. It's
Right.
kind of like if there is a stigma, we brought it to ourselves, and the problem is it wasn't up to one person to decide because we don't have regulatory that for every Caribbean medical school that must basically operate under these criteria. Same thing for Dr. Nesheiwat and what does it do? Don't forget, Dr. Nesheiwat, is it unusual? It's unusual for such position to be appointed for a foreign medical grad or IMG, but which in general is given to people who are qualified as an AMG. But Dr. Nesheiwat is more than a qualified person. If you look at her history, she grew up in New York. She did her undergrad, I believe, in New York, and she did. Is it New York or no? Yeah, New York, and then she went 2 years to AUC. Basic sciences. She came back, did her rotations in the States. So these are the positive stuff I was just telling you about earlier. She has followed all these footsteps, and she has done her residency in Florida. Uh,
Okay.
so beside that, she's not your everyday doctor. She was involved in politics long before she was appointed. She was giving
Right.
opinions to Fox News. So
Right.
that put her right there above the benchmark for a regular physician who I just have an MD degree. It
Right.
doesn't matter, but do you really have the qualifications? So Dr. Nesheiwat has that qualification. Is it unusual for such position as a surgeon general to be held by a foreign medical grad? Yes, but it's not. I don't see it like as like, oh my God, like wow. Now let's go ahead and would the stigma go down a little bit? Yes, but again, it depends on who's watching Dr. Nesheiwat and who's not. So it depends on what
Well,
side of the politics are you in as well.
well, I mean that's true. So, but politics aside, it almost seems like, and in my experience, this seems like, as I said, I speak to so many program directors, including your program directors, as well as you, as well as people in leadership. It seems like the only real stigma typically comes from people who don't know anything about medical education. That's what I've typically seen. For most people, every time I would talk to a program director, they'd say, well, have they passed step one, step two, as you said, number of attempts, where have they done their rotations, what is the temperament of the student? If all that checks out, 99% of physicians don't really care where you study, because the USMLE, or the medical licensing examinations, seem to be the great leveler. Doesn't matter where you went. You could have gone to Timbuktu, for example, and done medicine. But if you come back to the United States, you took the test, you got a good score, you passed in one attempt. As a result, you're at par with basically any American student. However, this perception that we're really talking about, it seems to entirely reside with non-medicos, as they call it. The average person on the street, you walk into your cornered bodega, and they will talk about, people have opinions on everything. So they're talking about medical education, and they'll say that, oh yeah, Caribbean schools or IMGs are really not at par. But in my opinion, it seems like the people who know anything, like yourself, or program directors, they definitely know how to parse out the information. And at the same time, it also seems like, from what you're saying, that they're just because they're from an AMG does not necessarily mean that it's a slam dunk and they're going to be accepted into a residency program. But keeping that in mind, do you think so? For example, I mean, last year we had, as a school, we had a record number of students. We had 117 match into residency. That number's just going up, up and up. Considering everything that is happening, and Dr. Nesheiwat, whether she gets confirmed or not, I don't necessarily know. But her very appointment, do you think it is a moment of pride for Caribbean medical schools?
It is, but it's. I feel like it's more of unilateral moment of pride. It is
Okay.
a big deal for AUC,
Uh huh.
obviously, because they're gonna send it says like, "Wow, AUC." Would the Caribbean
Okay.
school look at it says, "Oh my God, look at it"? Yes, but does it really, truly, in reality, does it make a difference? That's the
I mean, does it? I don't know. Do you think it does?
maybe it will decrease the stigma again a little bit, but I don't think
Okay.
it will erase. Everyone at the end of the day is held to the standards.
A lot of our students are really confused about transitional year. They don't really know what that means. Can you let us know what a transitional year really is?
Yes, sure. But before I go into this, I just want to let you know, even though I'm an American, a Lebanese, IMG, my undergrad here, 2 years offshore, 2 years clinical rotations here,
Mm-hmm.
been here for 30 plus years, authority comes with responsibility. So at the
Yes,
end
of
of the
course.
day, it is not just because, let's say, Dr. Nesheiwat is an IMG, we're going to start giving free passes. Hey, IMGs, come over here. Here you go. No. So at the end is when we look, we oversee the whole entire program. And what's
Right.
important to us maybe the other side, the students might not be aware. It is important for us to build a strong program on a national level, passing the board 100%, because without this, that will hinder the quality of the program. And then we will put on probation and we will lose the program. So we are held at a benchmark. We look at people, how many people are we going to train and how many are we going to stay with us? This is very important question for us because we are building these residency programs to have a better quality care for the community. And if we cannot achieve that at the end, we have failed. So there are so many metrics that the programs overall, each one comes with authority, but also with responsibility. So it is a lot that we look at behind the scene when we are looking at candidates. That's why we look at the tiness. Like if somebody coming from the Midwest, AMGs or a foreign medical graduate here in the Valley, I take probably this one here because I know I don't have to groom them and teach them the culture of the Valley. They're very comfortable. I know they will stay with us, knowing that their parents here, they grew up here. You see, there's no set like 1 + 1 = 2.
Right. And I think it's very important to highlight that a residency program at the end of the day is still education. A lot of people mistake that just because they're getting paid, it's a job. Yes, it is a job. But at the same time, I know that you have accreditation responsibilities. You have responsibilities to not just to the student that you're taking in, making sure that they learn what they're supposed to be learning. They have requirements that you need to fulfill. And eventually, you also have a commitment to, as you mentioned, the community.
Yes.
Because at the end of the day, you are producing physicians to essentially ensure that there are no, in the bigger scheme of things, there are no healthcare deserts in the United States as such, or at least in the areas that you're operating.
With all this said, with all this that you just said, a perfect match list would be if they all match in the program, it would be I would say 60 to 80% AMG, 20 to 40% offshore, with diversity.
Right.
That will be a perfect ranking list if you will be able to match them all. So not only we look at that when it comes to diversity, here you have to diverse because you don't want to stigmatize the program as this is only AMGs. So a U.S. citizen who took a loan for $250,000 coming back home, they have nowhere else to go. You don't want to stigmatize it. Says, okay, you're going to be flipping burgers at McDonald's. That's not right. Also, don't forget every 4 students that don't match who went offshore and they have loans, they make up $1 million. And this is eventually is going to be written off if they don't end up having jobs. And the taxpayer is going to end up being responsible for it. So all this, at least in the back of my mind individually, is taken in consideration. That's why I said, number one, I would like to have the AMGs. If I could have 60% to 80%, perfect. If I have 20 to 40% of the offshore who are U.S. citizens coming back home, I'm not talking about total foreign money. That would be perfect. Why? Because eventually I'm helping also the citizens of this country to pay back their loans and then establishing a family. Also, we look at diversity. I don't want anybody to say that this is an American grad-only program. I don't want anybody to say this is only a Caribbean program. I don't want them to say this is only affiliated with this medical school in the United States versus that school. We want to stay as neutral as possible. It is in our interest to do so.
Right. And I do want to point out, like within the residency, the NRMP application process, there are some programs that just very clearly say that if you're not an American citizen, we won't even consider you. And whatever the requirements of the program are, there are certain programs that focus entirely on American citizens, irrespective of whether they went to a Caribbean school or a U.S. school. And I believe one of your programs tend to be like that. If you're an American citizen, that's when you're coming in, or a permanent resident, not just an American citizen. Is that right?
Correct. So we don't sponsor visas. We do have enough applicants from the states to
Hmm.
fill our programs every
Right.
year. We have people who come rotate with us. They signal us as gold. And there's so many signals nowadays with the new platform that you can send to a program. So it always in. But we do
Okay.
absolutely look at U.S. Or how do you say it rather than U.S. Citizen, um, working eligibility
Right.
in the United States.
Okay. Awesome. Going back to the question of the transitional year, what is the transitional year? Because I get that a lot from students. They're like, why should I apply for a transitional year? I mean, it's so uncertain. I don't know what's going to happen after that. Well, what are your thoughts
Yeah.
on that?
So transitional years could be the best thing that happened to you in your life and could be the worst thing that happened to you in your life.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yes. So
Please elaborate.
I'm
That's a
to
loaded
elaborate,
statement.
and I bet you a lot of people don't know this information. How is it first beneficial? So a transition year is created mainly for program what we call advanced programs. Programs who are, let's say, 4 years, but they need a transitional year to begin with. So they go through years, let's say OB-GYN, let's say neurology. But the hospital itself, they have the neurology program. It's total, let's say, of 4 years, including the transitional year. A transitional year, usually a year that you work 1 to 2 months in each department. It's kind of like a jack of all trades. Uh, one couple months at the emergency, 1 2 months on the floor in the IM, 1 to 2 months on the family. It depends of which residency programs in your institution has sponsored that transitional year. So if we say I am the program directors and the faculty of I am family and emergency sponsored that transition in the year, obviously they're going to end up rotating at all these sites. And there is a schedule in there. Some of them will be outpatient, couple of elective, research. Everything is the same as any first year. What can you do with this year? Why this is now the good part? We said that could be the best thing happen to you. Yes. Normally, if you go into a program who is an advanced program, they don't have transitional year, but they do have the actual program. Let's say neurology in state X. You apply in the match and then you get accepted. But they say, okay, now go find your own transitional year, right? So that same candidate applies separately in ERAS for a transitional year. And they ask you in ERAS, have you been accepted somewhere else? You say, yes, I've been accepted at so-so hospital in this state, but I do need that transitional year. We prefer to give that transitional year to this person. Why? Yeah.
Okay.
Now, why is that? Why do we prefer to give it to this person? Because it is our responsibility, and this is our nightmare here as a program, to help people who went into transition year to move up to PGY2. And we don't have,
Okay.
in our program, we don't have the mean to take on to PGY2 because all our programs are categorical,
Are full.
which they
Yeah.
start from day one. They have all the years they need. We don't have a program standing alone and it needs a transitional year. So for us as a program, it's a nightmare if this person does not have a PGY2 somewhere lined up. So if you come in with
Okay.
PGY2, we would love to have you. If you don't,
Okay.
it's going
Okay.
to be a big question mark. Now, this is the
Okay.
good side that basically it could be the best thing happen to you in your life because you have matched into an advanced program and you're missing this year. And here we are, we're looking for someone who match in an advanced program and they need that 1 year. So it's kind of like working for both of us now. You have your
Okay.
PGY2. I don't have to worry about supporting you, finding a
Okay.
residency as a program. You just need my transitional year. Perfect. Now, how could it be a nightmare? If you do transitional year and you have not secured PGY2, and then you decided the following year to go ahead and apply for a program, that program, there's potential this program might lose funding for that year that you have done.
Oh, okay.
So you might stigmatize yourself, and a lot of programs you might qualify for them. They wanted to take you, but then they say that you already exhausted 1 year of funding from what you're eligible for. I give it to you as a different example. Let's say I apply for family medicine, I get in, I do 1 year, and I get out, I go and I switch programs, and lucky I go into surgery, it's 5 years. Now, what I've been approved to do by the CMS is a 3 years residency. That's what they're funding. I have utilized one, I have 2 years left. If I go into surgery, they're gonna pay the first 2 years, and the next 3 years has to be coming from the hospital pocket.
Okay. So is it very common for students to get advanced placements in PGY2 in the first year that they're applying for residency?
Yes, so through ERAS, because now you have all the what do you call it? All the hospitals, all the programs in front of you. Once you match into a one, all we need is basically, yes, I have matched into this program, then hey, transitional year is yours. And a lot of time we try to build relationships with programs who have advanced programs and they need a transitional year. That will be the easiest thing to do.
Okay. So currently, does your program have any tie-ups or memorandums of understanding or anything like that with any program that might help a potential transitional year when you do start the program?
So I don't have an official memorandum of understanding for transitional year, and I don't think should be one to make it fair for
Oh, okay.
everyone. Should be fair for everyone. But we could have an understanding without the memorandum.
Okay.
So I do recently came across occupational health residency, and
Okay.
from what I noticed, from what I understood also, is the biggest hurdle for the people who are applying for such program was that transitional year. They needed 1 year, and the occupational medicine, I don't want to say they're having a hard time finding, like having their candidates matching in a year, but it's not as easy. And so there are two potential candidates we're talking about. They said if we are able to secure transitional year for them, then definitely these will be on a top list for us. Of course, they will go through ERAS like anybody else, and they will apply, etc., etc., etc. We'll make sure we qualify for our transitional year, and they qualify for their program. So yes, there's kind of like our understanding, and would like to collaborate with more programs if possible to offer these transitional years to help the students be able to secure a full program without worrying about the transitional year.
Okay. So tell me a little bit more about this occupational medicine residency. I've never really heard of that before.
Uh,
What is that?
Same thing. It was new to me, with full honesty, and I
Okay.
haven't done my full due diligence on it yet. I've been busy with preparing for programs for next year, but it is on the agenda to look more. But here's what I understood from a nutshell: being an occupational medicine physician, you go through ERAS like anybody else. Mainly, you work. Obviously, the name gives it up. Occupational medicine. I see
Mm-hmm.
that you're working for GM, Ford, Microsoft. So these
Oh,
these big companies, and then the focus might be the track. I'm assuming they could be like an OSHA, HIPAA, there, etc. They'll be more knowledgeable about these subjects as well. I myself work in GM when I was a student going
okay.
to college. So I
Right.
do remember having our own medical center, if you will, or mini medical center. So anything happen that you
Ah,
go there, that physician is familiar with what goes on, what are the common injuries that happen. Like something went into my eye at that time, right?
I see.
It could be from welding a car or
Right,
whatever,
right,
right?
right, right.
So right away they'll be able to fix you up. That depends on the resources they have. If they don't have the resource, they send you immediately to an occupational physician contracted with them. which they have more resources. So you are a physician, you're a doctor, you're practicing, just your setting, I'm assuming it's not the typical setting that we heard of. You go to the clinic and you see everyone that walks in. You're mainly dedicated for that particular company. And these we call it
I
big
see.
companies.
So one of the biggest complaints with medicine is that the hours are really long. But this almost sounds like there might be a possibility that this is essentially a 9 to 5 job for a doctor. Is that right?
Could be at and the setup and the resources and the money they have at that particular company, right? So
Okay.
when it comes about, could it be 9 to 5? Could it be this? Depends on the supply and demand. Depends where you are.
Okay.
If you have resources that they need and they can't find it anywhere else, obviously you will have a card to bargain and say, that's what I want, and within reasons, right?
Okay.
But if you don't, and the area is saturated, you are in a big city in California, in
Mm.
Chicago, etc., you demand something that doesn't work for us. It says, okay, next in line. And that goes to everyone, I guess, right? Not only the
Okay.
occupational medicine. Yes.
That's very interesting. So, what about earning potential? You did talk about salary. Do you think that these particular students have, or these particular residents on finishing residency, do they have the potential to earn as much as a person who finished internal medicine or family medicine once they graduate
Absolutely. It
from the
depends.
residency?
It depends who do you compare them to, right? They might make more money. So if you send me in a big brand name company who have the money, become peanuts to them, right? They just need the commitment, etc. If you compare those to a family medicine or internal medicine physician in a big area that is saturated, they go by the average pay, maybe a little bit more. I give you example. In Chicago, if you go to a brand name hospitals in general, I don't want to say this is a stigma, but you end up being paid less. Why? You get the,
I've heard that. Yeah.
and you go up a little bit in the suburbs, you might make twice of that. Just go to an
Oh,
area, it's called like
Rockford.
sandwich area, or whatever they say, like
Yeah.
almost double. I'm telling.
Yeah.
Uh,
No, I've definitely seen that. I mean, people getting post residency, getting jobs at, say, within the city of Chicago versus getting a job at Rockford, which is a little over an hour away from Chicago.
good luck.
And you're right, that salary jump was insane. I mean, I would totally do that drive
Yeah,
if it were
I
me.
tell you another example. That's in Illinois as well, because I lived there for a long time. 16 years was enough for me to understand the market.
Mhm.
An ER physician in the city of Chicago might make less than a family medicine holding an ER or handling an ER in the suburbs,
Right,
in a
right, right,
smaller
right,
community.
right. So it why is this not, like everybody you talk to, they want to do family medicine, internal medicine, OB, surgery, pediatrics. Why is this occupational medicine not very well renowned?
I think it's lack of education on marketing as well. It seemed like you and I, we just said together that you said, I never heard of it before. I said my info is limited, right? So it's more of marketing and education that falls on the shoulder of the hospital that is holding such program to market more and educate people, and on the program director and the faculty to market out. It says, okay, what are the benefits actually of occupational medicine? To me, it sounds great. I do remember interacting with occupational medicine physician uh, in GM at that time, back in 1994 or five. But again, I
Okay.
never knew that this is an occupational medicine. The next thing I know about occupational is normally let's say big companies who don't have that physician on site, etc., and they don't have the resources to evaluate workers' compensation, etc., they might end up contracting with urgent care that is close to them.
Okay. Right.
And so if something happened to somebody at work, they can obviously go down the street to the urgent care to be taken care of, and they could be on some sort of a contract, or maybe I don't know how the billing goes exactly. But
I see.
those who don't have, let's say, a big car dealer, right? Food, whatever. There's a strip of car dealers, and there are big companies. BMW, usually you find them
Right.
all on the same street, right? Next to
Right,
each other.
right, right.
BMW, Volkswagen, and Ford, etc., Range Rover. These employees, they get benefits and they need to be taken care of. If something happened at work, who's going to take care of it? So,
I
so
see.
either they will have a physician there, maybe will cater to all these guys as possible. It depends on the number, or they end up contracting with someone down the street who have an urgent care, a family medicine, for example, who have
I
an
see.
urgent care. Yes.
Wow, this is so awesome. I never really realized that there would be residency programs that I wouldn't know about. That's very, very interesting. So, Dr. Majid, thank you so much for all that information. I hope what we talked about today really was an eye opener for some of our audience and viewers, and this influences them and maybe even influences them to make different career choices based on some of the information that you gave us. But once again, thank you so much for your time. And one parting question, this is when you were talking about Dr. Nesheiwat. Uh, is there any point where you guys actually crossed paths at any point
I don't
in
believe
your
so.
career?
Uh,
Oh, okay, okay,
her
okay.
background,
Because there was a lot of familiarity with which you talked about her. So,
yes, her background is originally from Jordan.
I see.
Yes, so we do have a Middle Eastern background,
I
both of
see.
us. But definitely, I want to congratulate her, regardless that I don't know her personally on that position, and it was
Uh-huh.
well deserved based on her background. She's not new to this position. I think she qualifies more than a lot of people who probably coming from any medical school. I'm not gonna name any of them, but in
Right, right,
general,
right.
it's well deserved, and definitely she will do a great job. I hope that, like me myself, be able to, with this position, decrease the stigma of on IMGs, and I hope the IMG schools as well in general, and the ministers of the island in general realize that bringing a bad apple can really mess up the whole entire box. Be
Right,
more regulated, respect the accreditation bodies, why they're there, and live up to the benchmark where you want the students to practice. If your students wants to come to the States and this is the market you're targeting, please have the resources for them and make sure that you meet these benchmarks. If they want to go to the UK, same thing. I would say look at the UK benchmarks and make sure they qualify to be there. Otherwise, I want to encourage all your students, especially St. James School of Medicine. We're very, very happy and pleased to have you here. They have created a pipeline for us. And then on the first batch, we take 1 to 2 students. It does make a difference to us how hard they work, because that, and the next year we say, okay, you know what? This is really working. Know that every student comes into any program. And I'm telling you, this is under the table, that where you come from, your school, you could leave a good or bad stigma, regardless of where you come from. You could be from the best schools in the United States, and you come up with an attitude, and you don't contribute to the program. You leave a bitterness next year, and people might end up indirectly judging. Even though we all take courses about being unbiased and how to explore and recognize bias inside of us, so we don't discriminate against anybody, at least directly or knowingly. But know that working hard and contribute to the program, it definitely open up the road for your colleague, for your friends, for your school.
awesome. Final thought, Dr. Majid, with residency so close, any words of wisdom and advice for the students who are lining up for the match in March this year?
Sure. So especially for again here we need to differentiate a little bit. Unfortunately, for IMGs or Caribbean, if you do not, first of all, once you submit your application and you're set, please do not start emailing every single one and bring me somebody to vouch for you, tell me this is the prince of Himalaya, the son of the king, whoever. I don't care who's your father. With all respect, we respect that, of course, but we don't care. We care about what you're
Right.
bringing. Don't go and have somebody call me from Yale University giving you a letter of recommendation. That should have been given to you from day one and submitted to ERAS. Your letter of
Uh-huh.
recommendation, don't make them generic. We look at them, we read them.
Right.
They're very important. Be committed to the program and be eminent of what you want. You want family medicine, just go for family medicine. Once you submit your application, unless there is something really important, like let's say you have taken step 3, then I will send an email. Says there has been a change, an update in my status, and just want to inform you that respectfully. And that's it. And this is bringing us to another thing. Does it make a difference? Yes. Having step 3 for an IMG, it makes a huge difference. Huge. You get we get a pass because now you have passed step 1, you have very good scores on step 2 CK, and guess what? You close step 3, which I don't have to worry about you moving from PGY1 to PGY2. So I do encourage students, IMG specifically, Caribbean, to take step 3. But under these conditions, if you are a fresh graduate, you have done very well. Obviously, you passed step 1, you have done very well on step 2 CK, you scored 230, 240, let's say 240. Would you take step 3? I would not, because now you're expected to score higher on step
I
3,
see.
right? Or maybe 230, 10 points less, 10 points more. So we're going to hold you to that standard. Otherwise, we're going to say, like, what happened to you? Let's say you didn't perform well on step 2 CK. Then, yes, rock the step 3 and show us, like, look, yes, my step 2 CK was not the best, but here's what. Here's a step 3, even a higher level exam without PGY1, and look what I got.
I got you. Well, thank you so much for the words of advice. I think that's very, very helpful. That's really good to know because that's a question we get a lot. Should I take step 3? Should I wait? And it almost seems like there's a strategic decision point at that point, whether, hey, I did really well in step 2, let's wait for step 3 until I get residency, versus I got okay scores on step 2. Maybe step 3 has a chance to improve my
Absolutely,
application.
it would. And then this is the
Okay.
strategic decision that I make if I'm there.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Dr. Majed, as always. What a pleasure to have you on our show. And again, from myself, as well as on behalf of St. James and all the students, thank you for everything that you do for specifically St. James and just generally IMGs across the board. I know you've been a very, very big advocate of IMGs, whether they're Caribbean students or international students. You've opened doors for so many of them. So we really, really thank you for that.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me. I'm humbled and honored to be here. Again, thank you, Mr. Kosher Guha, for this podcast, and hope we can meet again on different topics that could benefit the students and the educational arena in general. I want to thank St. James School of Medicine for the awesome students that they send us here, and they are contributing to our programs. We look forward not only for them that they have matched, but to retain them in the valley as we are growing.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Youssef Majed, for those words of wisdom and your insights on really the changing perception of Caribbean medical students and about your residency programs. Truly, the achievements that you've made and the strides that you've taken for South Texas Health Systems and as South Texas Health Systems by starting these residency programs. It's really, really amazing. Again, thank you, a heartfelt thank you from the entire IMG community, as well as all the Caribbean schools, for everything that you do for the medical community in the United States in general. Thank you so much. And if you like our content and if you found this interesting, please do not forget to give us a like and follow. It means a lot for us, and it helps us keep going and really inspires to keep doing this for you. If you like the podcast, download more episodes and more content like this from any of your favorite streaming services, like Spotify. But again, remember, there is no shortcut to becoming an MD. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for tuning into our show. We hope you enjoyed another episode of Med School Minutes. If you like our content, please follow us and receive notification when a new show is posted. This podcast is brought to you by St. James School of Medicine. For a video version of this podcast, please check us out on sjsm.org/video.